The Leading Like a Lady podcast was created to remind Black women, young and old, that acting like a lady is exactly what the world needs in leadership. Don't forget to subscribe to the blog so that you receive updates on when we post directly to your email. Is this movie for those who watch the Broadway play? Probably not. You're not going to be as wowed, in my opinion, from the film as you probably were when you watched it on Broadway, especially if you saw someone like Idina Menzel in the play. Is this movie creating a new fandom, especially from those who never saw the play? That depends on how you measure it. Technically, right now, it's the highest grossing Broadway musical adaptation of all time, according to CBS News. And that could prove that people who would have never seen it on Broadway or who haven't seen it on Broadway may want to watch the movie, at least. Was this a beneficial and necessary movie to make? That is a more complicated question. And it is very subjective, based on the viewer and the emotional context that they bring to the film. But it is a necessary question to ask based on what the film director says in his interviews and based on the obvious themes covered in the Broadway musical and the book that it is based on. So, here's an attempt at answering this question. And feel free to leave respectable comments below with your reaction to this response and movie review. First, a general review of the cinematography and the screenplay. I'm not as equipped to discuss cinematography as I'm a writer primarily, so my biggest critique is going to be about the screenplay. Nevertheless, speaking from a novice perspective, the visuals and special effects look great to me. That's what kept me most engaged. I think the dancing through life visuals were cool. I liked the backstory of Marissa Bode, who is an actress playing Elphaba's sister, who in real life is a paraplegic woman. I liked that they actually involved her in the stunts for the opening scene. I thought that was cool, and it met Jon Chu, the director's desire for an inclusive set, something we'll get into later. What I hated was the pacing of the screenplay. Many reviews already pointed out that part one of this two-part movie is already as long as the entire Broadway play, which means that the screenwriters had to add more scenes to the movie than there were in the original stage adaptation, and there was no payoff for it. It felt as if they forced dialogue and musical numbers to go longer than needed, things that would have been more effective maybe on a stage than on a screen, in my opinion. For example, the train scene where Elphaba was on her way to see the wizard was stretched way too long unnecessarily. I even think that the opening scene, when the town was celebrating Elphaba's alleged demise, went on too long. I don't remember it being that long in the play. And as much as we Broadway fans love Defying Gravity, that scene could have been a lot shorter, unless they were going to include a back and forth dialogue between Glinda and Elphaba coming to terms with what they just saw and what was revealed about the wizard, and the moral dilemma that might have been going on in Glinda's mind that would ultimately make her easily turn heel and then be used in Madame Morrible's propaganda campaign suddenly. They could have done a better job maybe unpacking that if they were going to make the scene longer. And this is a good transition to that complicated yet necessary question I mentioned earlier. Was this a beneficial and necessary movie to make? Before I decided to write this review and share my thoughts, I wanted to research what Jon Chu said about his choices in directing this film. I wanted to be careful not to project my own visceral reactions from the film onto him and to make assumptions about what he did or did not consider as repercussions to his casting and story adaptation choices. In an interview with CBS News, Chu said his childhood in California, growing up as the son of Chinese immigrants, drew him to the project. He also described where the story is going in this way, quote, "Elphaba says the words, 'Something has to change within me. Something is not the same.' Those words are the thing that made me realize I had to do this movie now. Part one is the choice to rise, and part two is what happens when you stand up." When he says all of this, you can make a safe, educated guess about what he's alluding to. Anyone who watched the play, or as a hardcore fan might have even read the book written by Gregory Maguire, knows that this story is about fascism. It's not up for debate. And someone right now is in the comments probably yelling woke police, but I'm sorry to tell you that almost every other modern day book, movie, or TV show is a clarion call for pending late stage capitalism and dystopia at this point. And this is what worried me, to be frank, about the movie from the time that they announced who was playing Elphaba. The first time I watched the play was, ironically, in November 2016. Hopefully, I don't have to explain the significance of that time period. I went to watch the play as a chaperone for high school students from a predominantly Black and Latino neighborhood, not knowing anything at all about the story behind the play. So I'm thinking that this is going to be a nice little escape from what was happening in American politics at the time. Boy, was I wrong. But I don't remember being too upset once I realized that what the topics were that the play was going to cover. Like most people probably did, I cried and thought maybe, just maybe, if more people would watch the play, that they would be motivated to do something in real life to fight the evils that were being represented in the musical. Fast forward to 2024 and it's like deja vu with Vertigo. Not only did we have the same election results as 2016, but we've also had at least a year of seeing violence against innocent people at the hands of heads of state without impunity. It's important to also say that we've had the first Black woman to secure the presidential nomination and come very close, the closest to making history as the future US president. I think this is why watching Cynthia Erivo as Elphaba affected me more than I wanted it to. Watching two white women as both Elphaba and Glinda made it less psychologically stressful to process the political messages when I saw Wicked on Broadway. But casting Elphaba as a Black woman with micro braids dealing with microaggressions made it impossible for me to ignore the very real parallels between what was happening on screen and what we had just experienced IRL. Honestly, I was a little uneasy about Erivo's casting when I first heard about it because I immediately read it as coding green skin with black skin, and thereby perpetuating the subconscious notion of black skin being associated with evil or being less than. I know Erivo has an astounding voice and would do Elphaba songs justice, but I couldn't help but think this would be another unfair way to typecast yet again a Black woman in roles that force them to defend their humanity. Then, the movie unluckily premiering in November 2024 after a very racially, misogynistically charged political situation just made my movie-going experience worse. I'm not sure that that's 100% the movie's fault because I already knew the themes of the story going in and I knew that this wasn't going to be a slapstick comedy. Nevertheless, in my opinion, if Chu's goal was to put a mirror up to society and ask viewers, what are you going to do when you see injustice in real life? Then he should have put the responsibility on someone else and left Black women out of it. I get it. Diversity in media matters. Black women need to access these high-profile, hopefully also high-paying roles like this in Hollywood. And this was a very, very big role. But I wish that it wasn't at the expense of always having to take roles that involve trying to educate people on morality or begging people to see marginalized groups as worthy. So many articles in publications like the Harvard Business Review criticize symbolic efforts for addressing diversity and marginalization without addressing deeper issues of what it takes to make sure life improves in a tangible way for those hurt by discrimination. With Erivo cast as Elphaba and Ariana Grande playing Glinda, the message Chu seems to be sending is that we need more white people to be better allies. And I love this YWCA article that says that this is the wrong conversation to be having. Instead, we should be discussing the difference between what an ally is and what an accomplice is. An ally says they're going to support you. An accomplice doesn't just express support. An accomplice doesn't do virtue signaling, like Glinda taking the "g" out of her name in respect for animals' accents, or white women wearing blue bracelets to show Black women they care. Instead, an accomplice takes consistent, tangible steps to challenge and dismantle oppressive systems and structures, even if or when it means that they lose the privileges that their status affords them. Spoiler alert in case you're unaware, Glinda won't do that at the end of the story, and Elphaba is driven to live underground away from the city that she grew up in, or else risk being destroyed by the people in it because of their prejudice. That's not a message that I want to be conveyed to Black girls or women when they go see this movie, when they see a Black woman cast in this role, dealing with challenges and circumstances that are very similar to what they're experiencing in their real life. Take away the talking animals and etc. Maybe this has to do with the trend of Black women being seen as society's saviors, of people always trying to praise us for or convince us to be the soldiers who put our lives on hold to save others from themselves. We are tired. At least I am tired. And I just want to go see a movie and for once not think about that, about fighting for the right to just be or to chill. So was this a necessary movie to make? I think so. I subscribe to both the Marxist and psychoanalytic schools of thought around film. This means that I think TV and movies are meant to help an audience deconstruct individualistic and systemic dynamics that either promote or hinder equity and universal access to a high quality of life. Was this a beneficial movie to make? Not with the casting. I am, of course, one person coming with unique emotional and psychological baggage to this film, so my opinion is not law. However, this noticeable difference I've experienced watching the play in 2016 versus now watching the movie in 2024, under, to be honest, very similar circumstances, tells me that the casting choices in general, not just in this movie, make a huge impact on the way that you process messages from a piece of media. For example, what would happen if Erivo was cast as Glinda and Ariana as Elphaba? I bet you right now someone is shouting no at the screen and thinking that it wouldn't make any sense. And my immediate response to that person is, why? You'd have to admit that it is because we assign people to roles in a make-believe situation, in a make-believe medium, based on what roles that they're assigned in reality, whether or not it's fair or perceived as limiting. To make this long story short, it is not beneficial to make a movie like Wicked if an audience isn't ready to have their worldview shattered significantly, or if a director isn't brave enough to try to do that, regardless of the audience's pushback, and in a more creative and thoughtful way. Until we're ready to have that conversation, as I said before, leave Black women out of it. Hash out the details amongst yourselves. Don't forget to subscribe to the blog so that you receive updates on when we post directly to your email.